Todo estiguini, Ungan. Okay. Right. We are live. Esta gigi Instagram. Nenga zebetseko. Esta live lokwigi. All right. Ungan. Matsotsogi YouTube lokwi.
Mali.
Okay. Ungan and gigi Facebook. Right. And again. Man list to hit. Man list to hit. Again and again. All right. All right. Hafede todos hamzu gwena hudzung estigio nuevo en episode Fanachu. Guahui host Midzu. Si Michaelu Hanbavakwa. Zan. Hunget. All right. Para hafedi tapuni esti. Tipescadotzu. I am not a fisher. Hungen, mas matungwe familiaco como manjereru. My family is best known as being blacksmiths. Hungen, si tatahubihu I defunto Jack Luhan, gof matungo como herero si tatanya loqui, defunto Mariano Leonguero Luhan, herero loqui. Ti megay tiningo hu puri lenat la pescador. The best fish that I catch is fish fillet. Hungan. Enawi minangahe. Lo, hutungunay na esti pinesca sen importante ki kotorata. Fishing is something that has been a part of Chamorro culture ever since. And it is something that shows iminenhalomitautauta, the intelligence of our people, but it is also something that shows the adaptation of our people as well. The evolution, the ways that we have incorporated new technology, the ways that we have adapted to changing conditions and realities. And so fishing and fishing practices is one way that we can bring together all sorts of elements to talk about Chamorro history, Chamorro culture, Chamorro language, and so on. And I'm very, very happy to have with me somebody who is great to talk about those things. And we may have somebody else who's joining as well for today's episode, Lotalis Buenti Atrasao. And so we have with us today Senor Bernard Punzalan, whom many of you may know because if you're looking to find Chamorro love in all the right places, you want to make sure you're not related. And so hadzi mas maulik na tauta para un faisen siempre si Bernard Pansalangi chamorroroots.com. I'm just kidding. But Bernard here, of course, is somebody who is best known nowadays for Chamorro genealogy. He is a great person whenever anyone wants to trying to find their way in terms of getting started. I always say, Senor Bernard, his website, Chamorro Roots, is a great place to get started. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. It's easier than if were trying to look years ago, for example. But Senor Bernard is here to talk about a workshop that he and his nephew will be offering for Chamorro Day. The Chamorro Day Festival, which will be happening in Tacoma, Washington, later this month on June 25th. And so I'm going to
June
post.
27th.
What's that?
June 20th. Yes, the workshop on the 25th
Yeah.
and the festival on the 27th.
Hungan. And so where he's going to talk to us today, and this is a workshop that he's doing with his nephew, Chris Gogue and Estigi Idos. And he's going to talk to us today about this workshop, about Taladza fishing, the history, and also, of course, his family connection to this fishing practice, how his nephew is somebody who has been working to keep this alive. He as well, how you can also sign up for this if you haven't already done so. And so there's a lot of stuff that we're going to get into today. But first off, Senor, Jesus Masi Finatomo para este episode Fanatsu. And so, por favor, continue introducing myself. I introduced you a little bit, but let's let's get a little bit more introduction from you before we start talking about the Talata.
Okay. So I am Bernard Punzalan, like Miguel said. Um, I live currently living temporary living in Spanaway, Washington. Been here for about 20 years, and hope to be home one day, back home to live the rest of my days. But we'll see. Got grandchildren out here, so pretty hard to leave them here. Um, I do run the Chamorro genealogy project. This Talaza workshop that happened. Uh, every cultural tradition has a story and a person tied to it. And these stories need to be told. And when this opportunity came up, actually, by watching my nephew, um, Chris Gogue, when he came out just last year at the Marianas Festival, he set up, they allowed him to set up and he started making a talaza. And when I saw that, when I walked in, I said, whoa, I said, we got to do more about this. And so did the people down there. So that was the impetus, especially when I saw my nephew, because he's the generation after me, that just took the bull by the horn and started, so he's self-taught on this. But throughout my family, it goes back to my great grandfather, Leon Kitugua Anderson from Milense, from the Anderson line. He's known for making talazas in the 1800s, and he passed that on to his sons. Well, his grandsons, which was Uncle Joe Punzalan, and he became recognized as one of the master talazeros for net making as well. My dad was in the Air Force. He never did really make a net. I don't know if he ever. He passed away in 2010. I don't know if he ever knew how to make a net, but I know he knows how to mend nets because I would watch him mend the nets after we come back, and our nets get torn up on the reef from the coral on that. So our family tradition of and like what Miguel said is it's very important. This fishing, it's a hunting skill, and it's free. It's a survival technique of our people. And if anything should happen, like during the wars or anything, again, that survival technique needs to be used again. If that should ever, unfortunately, if it should ever occur, and hopefully not. But I think more people need to get into it because it's self-subsistence. You don't have to rely, you can survive on the land and the waters out there, especially if imports stop for whatever reason, global shortage and all that. It's very important for survival. Um, um, and like I said, I just saw my nephew doing this, and I think we need to perpetuate. No matter where we're at in this world, we need to spread that knowledge. I myself, I gotta admit, I am not a net maker by any means. As a matter of fact, when I started throwing the talaza, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I went out with my dad to the reef because I was finally allowed to throw the talaza. Before then, I would follow him to the reefs, and there's that term siliguaga, where you just carry the net and you keep still and don't make splash water, make noise, to scare the fish away, and you're just basically catching, helping the fishermen out there. But I didn't. It wasn't later when I realized that was actually a rite of passage, and you're learning right there everything that you should and should not do when you're out there fishing, especially out on the reefs and on the shores along inside on it. Things like that. We take for granted. They're shown. They're innate things that we just do on a daily basis to survive with our culture and what we do for our family. We don't think about them until times like this when we realize, the importance of it. Especially, since many of us, the majority of the Chamorros are now part of the diaspora, and then hopefully one day make their way back to the islands um, um, for that.
Oh, si Zeus masi senyor gov bonito ano isinangan mo. Um, I appreciated so much. Agradeci mega na isinangan mo because on the one hand, I feel and one of the things that I really think is important nowadays is we do what we can given the realities. And so, you know, because for example, I work at the Guam Museum. There's the two buff Magalahi dude statues in front of the Guam Museum. When we look at the past, we think of a lot of people think of Chief Kipua as the giant ripped statue in Hagatnya. but then when we think about the past, I mean, not everyone was like glistening with muscles.
Yeah.
Not every, and you know, Chamorros probably it didn't all look like that, especially Chamorro men. And so, but even 100 years ago, not everyone was an expert fisherman necessarily. Not everyone knew everything exactly. Not everything was. And so when we get down into it, we need to kind of ground ourselves a little bit more because that's how you can actually make progress. Instead of feeling like we will always fall short beneath the cultural bar of our ancestors, what can we do to actually keep alive their traditions? And if you focus on that, well, you can do quite a bit instead of only focusing on how, well, I'll never be as ripped as Chief Kapua, you know, or oh, well, you know, I'm never gonna catch as many fish as my great grandfather did, or you know, but it's kind of like, but I can still make nets though if I try, if I practice. I bet I could still make a net though, and I could still teach some others. And so I like the way that even just you sharing the fact that you know that you and your family, the realities that so many Chamorros face, where being surrounded by culture but not being passed down, not being passed down directly, those cultural forms. Well, what do we do when we recognize that they're valuable, that we might want to keep them alive? And so I did want to share this quickly because you did mention it. And so, you know, this is and so the Guam Council on the Arts and Humanities, which is the government agency that is responsible for recognizing cultural masters on Guam, has recognized a handful of people as taladzeros, as cultural masters around taladzeros. And so one of them, Jose Punzalan, this is your great grandfather?
Jose Punzalan is my dad's oldest, no,
Oh,
older
sorry.
brother.
Oh, your
Yeah,
older brother. Oh, Despensa. That's right.
yeah, my
Oh
dad.
yeah, you were mentioning in your genealogy. Yes, you're.
Yeah.
And so this is it's important to, you know, because the Taladzero is still such an iconic part of life on Guam, and so it's good to see that, you know, Taladzeros have been recognized in this way, especially now that it's far less common in families. But I bet many people still don't even know that there are masters of Chamorro culture around Taladzeros. And so, you know, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this, though, as somebody who is much more familiar with Chamorro culture, Chamorro cultural history than others, and you know, what does it mean for your family to have a recognized master? But then, do you feel that enough is done to kind of educate our community about this?
I don't know if enough is done. I do know from the background because I carry the name Punzalan and the people that are affiliated. So the Punzalans have a genealogy of net makers. This I did learn by people that have reached out to me in the past. Um, I know one of Uncle Joe's godsons, Simon Camacho. I should have reached out to him, to also be a part of this. He knows how to make it. He learned through his Nino Uncle Joe this, and I think from Simon Camacho, um, there's a gentleman, a young guy by the name of Shane Root. I don't know his real last name on Facebook, who I believe has learned from Simon Camacho on that. So there is some traction taking. It just happens, they're not recognized. They're not out there in the public, um, at least they're not talking that much about it unless you have these individual discussions on it. So I'm curious, and that was the other point and focus of this workshop, was to bring out the discussions and to find out what do we have in our inventory, of people who can actually teach this particular skill and trait out there. So I'm looking forward to just sharing like what I'm telling you right now, the stories that I'm telling you. I'm hoping that they spark interest with the attendees that are there, or even listeners who are viewing this or who view it later and reach out on it. Um, I
Nice.
learned a lot about my grandfather through just this poster that you're talking about, the Masters of Tradition. I didn't know that it was my great grandfather Leon that was a net maker on this. All this time, I thought it was my namesake grandfather Bernardo Punzalan from the Philippines because their family lived off the lake, and you know they're fishermen, they're net fishermen as well. So I thought the skill came from him, but it's through this story where I found out. I said, "Oh wow, it was after all my great grandfather." And who knows? I'll never know, but if my grandfather Bernardo may have learned from his father-in-law, um, my great grandfather, on how to make nets. Because I do remember when we first moved back to Guam after my dad retired at the Air Force, we lived in my grandfather's house in Tamuning, and we were just amazed and just watch him for hours. He would be, sewing and weaving his nets in there, and he had his trademark, when he's weaving his net was he smoked these Tiparillo cigars, and you could just see the ashes, they're dangling down, still intact, as he's starting to sew his net. So um,
No,
I talked about the genealogy and the points of these stories, just by reading this stuff. And there's four masters of tradition or talajeros that I'm going to talk about, and reiterate some of the information that I found in the book, the traditions of Masters of Traditions and the Talajeros. I have recreated posters in the back from those pages, that I'm going to have on display, to help talk about them and what they've done because they actually have their stories too and how they got started, in all this.
oh yeah, no, I agree that the fact that Kaha went and interviewed families and then collected that information on sort of these talajeros, but also the other cultural artisans and masters is so important. Because one of the things that I've found is that through the Guam Museum, I use those posters, I use other resources, other things that research that I've done, and every once in a while I'll put out on social media something talking about this master, this cultural tradition. And one of the things that you find is that because nowadays the majority of all of the cultural masters that have been recognized have all estaman matay man mapus todo. And so even the knowledge that's on those posters is not known to most of the family members and the descendants. That maybe there is one a son or a daughter who still knows those things, but the rest of the children don't. The
Right,
grandchildren certainly don't know. The great grandchildren absolutely don't know. And
right,
so every time I'll post something about like one of the lesser known cultural masters, because Kaha acknowledged so many cultural masters, I'll always get messages and comments from people who say, I never knew that about my nana, or I never knew that about my tata. And, sometimes they've only passed away in the last 10 or 20 years. But that's why those posters are an amazing resource. I mean, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people just know them because they're in government buildings on Guam.
right,
You're
right.
waiting, you're going to visit somebody at the hospital and you walk by my grandfather's poster. You walk by Robert Taitano's poster. And so,
Yeah,
but yeah, I always learn something whenever I read through those.
yeah, and going back to I'm sorry if I keep bouncing back into genealogy in this because this is what I do, and I collect all these books, and because I never really knew the history until I started working on the genealogy project, and it's books like these that tell the family stories, and then if you're able to link that, tie your connection to that family and read that story and say that's my heritage in there. That's very important. So that's what I've done with a lot of these books, and that's why I engage in a lot of these different types of workshops when I see, how can I contribute, from the genealogy lens to certain workshops or to traditions. I'm more than happy to share what I have and what I know, with those things that go along with it. And Mike, Miguel, if you don't mind, I'm gonna try and see if I can. It's been a while since I do this. I'm gonna request to share the screen. I forget how
Oh,
to do
okay.
this.
Hungan Nenga. Wait, Nenga. It's Matulaika. Ma update these settings. Let me
Yeah.
here we go. Here, Enigi. Senior
Okay.
how?
Allow.
Wait.
Okay.
Oh wait, no, no. All participants. Enigi.
Okay. I'm going to, hopefully this works.
Enigi. Huli.
Okay. Which can you see? Oh, can you see my
Hungan, I can see the
slide?
PowerPoint.
Okay. Okay. So here's a cheat sheet for those that not going to attend or anything like that. But I do have my PowerPoint slides of what I want to go through. I don't want to share because the story, I told you already, it begins with my nephew, and this is a picture of him. Hopefully, can you see that? This is a picture of him set up at the Marianas Festival workshop the day before the festival itself, and just floored me when I saw him working on that. On his net, and they gave him space. I don't know what he did to commit. And I'm hoping that he can make it. Because we need to hear his story. More clear on how he got started with this and how Bertina Grejo allowed him to set up shop. And now because we're also gonna do a workshop there too. As many workshops as we can on Talazas, we're gonna do it. I'm there to help kickstart this, and then hopefully provide him with arm him with some information so that he can take these workshops and move forward with it, to discuss a little bit like the history that's important and some of the other stuff of what I'm going to share. But that's the second one, and that's the first slide. The second slide that I'm going to present actually is where I'm blessed by Senor Juan Chaco, who has wrote a song, and his song is Guihan Gisan Halam and Guihan Gisan Hizu, and he tells the story of how he learned to fish and how he knew how to fish for during high tide, low tide, and all the different types of fish where you can find them through his songs, through this song itself. And I'm going to be playing it in the background. And he, gave me permission to replicate his poster that he did because he taught this in one of his Chamorro classes. And then I also have the lyrics in Chamorro. And I guess not on this one, the translation in English. And I just wanted to share the importance of that, because that's a skill and technique, a trick to understanding, some of the stuff that fishermen go through that they don't talk too much, about unless you actually follow them.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm going to open up with introductions. I'm going to introduce myself, tell my story, and I'm going to have Chris tell his story. And then I'm also engaged, if there's anybody in the audience, too, that has, to introduce themselves because I have the genealogy. The minute they mention names that I already know, I'll try and link their genealogy and history with that. I do that in my genealogy workshops, and I hope to do it in this as well. I'm not an expert at Talaza history, so everything that I've put together, some of the stuff I've learned along the way in preparation of this workshop. So I'm going to talk to them about what I know and what I've learned, and then also, my experiences with it. And then we're going to go into, the Talaza net making techniques, which I'm going to hand over to Chris, and he's going to demonstrate the different parts and the names of the Talaza, and try and get people, kick-started on making some. Following that, we've only planned for like about a 2-hour workshop because we don't know how this thing's going to go. But the more interest there are in it, and the more we see where the interest lies at, whether it's in the net making or the casting techniques, more the history, then we'll tailor it towards that in the future. But we are going to close it out with Talaza immersion. Casting demonstration and practice, and how to set up. I have 2 talazas. Chris just got through telling me the other day that he finished making one out, so I think he's going to demo that, the one that he made on it. I don't know if he's had others, but I'm hoping that we'll also have the kids because I have a 6-foot net and a 14-foot net. So that I'm hoping that 6-foot net is good enough for the kids to start, throwing, on the weight and everything.
Wow.
Introductions, and the core of it, what we know, we share, we perpetuate. Going to keep instilling that, to get that so that we share the stories, and hopefully, people, feel free to correct us too, because we're not experts on this. So, if they contribute to it, it's only going to make this program stronger. And then I couldn't help but to throw in genealogy in this on there. I mentioned my great grandfather, Leon Kirgua Anderson, who was married to Antonia Tenorio Pereira. And then their daughter, Antonia, was married to my namesake grandfather. And here's Jose Punzalan on the left side. Chris's grandmother, Victoria Antidola, is the sister of Uncle Joe. And then there's my dad. My dad's the youngest of three boys in there, and then myself in there. So that's how I'm related to Chris and how we fall under this Talaza, Talaza genealogy within our family.
Oh no, Debbie doing the sound on a genealogy.
Yeah.
Hunga. You have to. I think I mean speaking for the younger generations where genealogy is not their preferred currency, but part of it too is that it's just but for the older generations it's a necessity. It was a must, you know, it was part of meeting, interacting with people, you had
Yep.
to know. You had to
Yep.
know who you're related to before you even felt really comfortable. And because it's kind of like, it's like, whose party are we going to? You had to establish
Yep.
the genealogical connections or the Tsensuli connections. You had to establish who we are to these people because then that then helps you understand how you need to react. What is it? Do we owe these people anything? Do we need to do anything for these people? What are my obligations? And so,
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the beginning of in the past. I think it still happens today because it happens out here. The Midnight Meter was saying almost the first part of the conversation is who's your family,
mhm,
to talk about that and establish the comfort zone, between and it actually guides how that dialogue and conversation is going to go, depending on how closely you're related, or if not distantly, or just through a connection of probably mutual, acquaintances. But it
mhm,
does help to guide, the discussion, no matter what the topic is.
mhm, mhm.
And then um, this one was an interesting one because I know that they say that from what I learned that it was the Spaniards that brought in the net making and everything. So I'm not. This is a taken during 1819, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know before that. It looks like it's before that, but it comes out of Freycinet's book, from this 1819 visit, if I'm not mistaken. And
Hungen, it was so it's Freycinet, basically it's his artists. Enigi Subrinumo.
That is
all
our
right, all right,
Hafide,
release.
Guam time is different from Washington time.
hafide, hafide. But for this drawing, just to finish off this drawing, and then we can
Yeah.
have your nephew introduce. What's fascinating about this, though, is that of course, certain types of things had come in by this time. Like, Chamorros were probably using the Focinos by this time,
Right.
and probably using the Taladza by this time. But that didn't mean that they didn't have fishing styles before. We do know, and Freycinet is there at that time when somebody you know a lot about, Luis de Torres,
Mhm.
is telling and describing with the assistance of his elder informants kind of
Mhm.
what did these things look like, and there's probably some Chamorros who still used them at that time.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is meant to be. And I think it probably does have um, like this maybe has a few it maybe has a few embellishments, but there
Was
was
wondering
also
about
some likelihood that De Torres was maybe sitting with the artist for the initial sketches
that. Mhm.
or stuff like that before it went to the final product.
Yeah. Yeah, with that, because I'm curious about this one right here.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that recorded as La Guazuti, so I don't
Oh
know how
yeah.
long that's been around. And if they did embellish, well, what concerned me was, or interested in me was, the clothing, barely any clothing on this. So that's why I'm thinking, yeah, perhaps maybe a few at that time, little clothing, maybe in the 1700s, but by 1819, I think they were a little bit more clothed on that. And then
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
just something, interesting to look into. Okay.
But oh yeah, let's meet Isubrinumo.
Yeah.
And so all right, so here, do you want to stop sharing real fast? And then we
Yeah.
can
Uh, Let me stop there.
and again. All right.
Hey, buenas half a day.
Buenas, Chris.
Half a
Half a
Yep.
day.
day, half a day, and welcome to the Fanachu podcast. We've started talking about the workshop, Taladza fishing, and so on. And so Continue and introduce in Maisa. How can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Christopher Gogue from Liambita. Um, I reside in Washington State. Moved out since 1996. Lived here since, but go back once in a while and visit the family and the land again. So yeah, and then just recently I just started this Talåya work doing a workshop. It was it was asked by somebody down for the Marianas Festival if I can showcase what I'm doing because they found out I was sewing Talåya for the group, for the dance group. And I was like, oh, might as well. And then after that, that's when it was Uncle Bertie. And then,
Yeah, so I was curious about that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I must have missed that when we initially talked. Because I was just so floored when you were set up and I walked through the door and I saw what you were doing, but I didn't realize you were doing it, as part of the I guess part of the attire, or
yeah,
whatever implement you guys are going to use for the dance group. So it's good to know that now I can document on how
yeah,
this thing is
yeah,
actually
that's how it
started.
started. Yeah. But me learning Talata, I've always been a Chilihuaga growing up with my dad. And he always brought an extra net. I didn't know why he was bringing extra net. I thought maybe if there was more fish out there, he was gonna throw the second one. But I carried that net the whole entire day, and then one day I saw a school of fish right beside where he threw, and I ended up throwing, and I was like, "Oh, I can do this." But I always tore the net, but never knew how to fix it until my uncle. I went to Guam one year, and then I borrowed the Talata from him, which is Uncle Bernie's dad, my Uncle Stucky, and I borrowed the net and I returned it. And my Auntie Patty, my dad's sister, called me and goes, "Hey, Uncle Stucky's pissed at you. You can't borrow the net until you know how to sew." I was like, "Sew?" Oh my god, I don't know how to sew a net. So I learned, on YouTube. YouTube University actually got me started. The most frustrating part, and I stopped for 10 years, and then I just finally picked it back up and realized what it is and
Awesome.
how to flow with a net. So it's challenging, but it's fun. It's time consuming.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
super
so
fantastic.
what started was Mariana's Festival, and then everything else that's going on. So now we got people that are asking us to do these Talaza workshops once they found out, right? We had
Yeah,
targeted Mariana Festival first, and then the Chamorro Day Festival came up, and then they called on you, right? They were asking you to do that. And I
sure.
said we need to tag team on this and get this going, because there's obviously a want and a need out there that people are curious about that. Um,
Yeah, it is. When I did the Marriott Festival, and it was just showcasing it. People were coming to me and goes, "Why aren't you doing a workshop? How can I learn, or how can I buy this net that you're making?" I was like, I'm making it for a dance group," and then that was it. Then I started thinking about, okay, let me do the workshop for next year's Marianas Festival, and then got that all set up. Then talked to Uncle Bernard, and we wanted to collaborate his thoughts with the history, and then my actions with sewing the net. So I was like, oh yeah, we can do that, man. I love it.
And then the other thing that fascinated me was that I thought it was very important because your generation that's moving this forward, so I want to make sure that you continue that, your aspirations and also to inspire others, the next generations to take over so that we can continue to perpetuate this no matter where we are at in this world.
Hungen. Hungen, that's actually one question that I do have because I think that we can see that in some ways, sort of the culture, cultural expression, cultural identity, the next generation is more interested in it. So for example, cultural dance is something where younger people may be more interested in it. Sort of the wearing of cultural jewelry is something where younger people may be more interested in it. Now, have you found what has the response that you've had in terms of the taladza? Because I think one of the things that we find is that when it comes to those more traditional crafts, there seems to be like a gap because it's one thing where it's something like that culture where you can wear it
Yeah,
and culture where it's more like a fashion thing or something like that. versus culture that requires a little bit more manual dexterity, a little bit more sort of energy in that regards, and that it's harder for younger people to adopt it because they're more invested in other things. And so, what has the response been like from younger people at the workshops that you've been to at the festivals, especially for those out in the diaspora? Some that may not have even grown up seeing a taledzero down on the beach, like we see in the Marianas. And so, what has the response been? Has there been interest? Has there been disinterest?
Um,
Like,
as far as when I did the showcase down at Marianas Festival in Portland, Oregon, there were quite a few people coming up to me and more fascinated at like what am I building? And I explained to them I'm making a talaza. It's a cast net, and then some were asking me, am I selling it? And then what about throwing the net? Do you throw the net too? I was like, I do all that, Um, and then I had people who were asking if I was going to end up doing a workshop for this year, and I told them I will do it this for next year, but not, you know, only because I wanted to just showcase what I was doing. So there was quite a bit of interest in learning the net making.
Senor Bernard, for
Yes.
you, have you seen that young people have been interested in it, or?
I haven't, because I really don't have much. I think I had a missed opportunity and, to actually gauge it. So last year during the Chamorro Day Festival, I had two talazas with me, and my brother Dave was around, and I asked him, could you please demonstrate throwing the talaza on that day? Um, that day was kind of like, despite, we had great attendance, but that day was rainy and wet to a certain degree, on it, and we had totally forgot about the talazas, and they never did make it out. So that was a mechanism for us to gauge the interest. I think that once we start to have the kids, and the people immerse into casting, I think their interest will peak more, and especially hopefully make them actually want to return to the island to actually see if what they, to practice what they have learned, if they've learned anything out here, and then try their skills out to see if they can catch fish out back home. But I'm hoping that's what's going to happen on this,
Yeah,
that
same.
the interest will spark. Because a lot of people, they can't comprehend, I'm worried about me going too nerdy into the history and lose people's attention. I don't want to do that, you know. So just by their facial expressions, I'll know if I should speed things up. Is all right, let's move on to more hands-on stuff, But I think the net making is going to be very valuable once they see that in action and pique their interest in the game, and as well as the casting immersion a lot, throwing techniques once we get in there.
Mm.
Um,
I definitely think that I mean, even for young people nowadays, it's interesting because Chris, before you joined, Senor Bernard was mentioning that one of the values of the taladza and taladza fishing is, of course, that it's a practice of sustainability and survival, right, for
Yeah.
feeding your family and so on. And this was something that even during the pandemic on Guam, where those who already knew the practice but hadn't practiced it in a while returned to it, and those who you know those who because we went for on island, for example, there was a few weeks where suddenly Payless had bare shelves,
Oh wow.
because of supply chain issues. And so then you're kind of like, oh my goodness, I think I got to remember how my parents and grandparents and great grandparents and how did Chief Kapua get his spam? Taimanu esti, tiutungu. And so you gotta look to the old ways. You gotta remember how people lived before. And so, even for me, it was very funny because my kids were in middle school at that point, and they were asking me about it, and I was like, well, gufti kapas zug yestina linatla guahatiningohu lo tadzanahu usa. And I was like, lots of old people have talked to me about these things, but I've never actually used any of these things. So I brought my kids out during the pandemic, and I was like, yeah, old people have told me how to catch octopus, but I've never actually tried it. Let's go try to catch octopus on the reef. And so, but I think one of the things that are finding nowadays, even though younger people are born into technology, I think a lot of them are getting man osun. They're sick of it. And they're craving real things too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think this is one of those paths to what is your Chamorro identity? Your Chamorro identity can be about real things. It can be about weaving. It can be about making a net. It can be about casting a net, right? And so that's one of those things where I think that for some younger people, not maybe not everybody, but for a good chunk of younger people, they will feel pulled in by that because with all the AI stuff that's out there, with all of the TikToks that are out there, having something that's real in your hands that connects you to, 50 generations before that have also made nets, I think that's something that's meaningful today. And so I definitely think so. Um, oh, we have a we have a few people that have commented they're watching from around the world, by the way. We've got people watching from Okinawa, from Texas,
Hey.
from Korea, from, from California, from the Marianas.
Yeah, so we're going to Guam in July, just coming up a couple
Mm.
more weeks from now. And so I started a net. I started this net here, and this net here is the 2.5 inch net that I wanted to bring back home, but I kind of like messed up after I sold it up to like 8 feet net. I then cut 6 feet off because there was a big mistake.
Uh,
That was like almost $100 worth of a fishing line that I just wasted there. 'Cause I was so excited. I wanted to get it done before I go to Guam. Then I started another net that I did finish, but this was more Talatan Sanhizong, which is the outside net for the reef. And so I finished that there, and it's this one here. So
nice.
I sew my own net, and also I also make my own lead. So that way I don't have to scrounge around looking for a place that even sells the lead because this is the hardest thing to look for, to find the lead um, for the Talata. So I make my own. I had a mold made, and then so now I can process all my nets 100%. And believe it or not, I got people ordering nets from me right now
Yeah.
that I can't start yet till I get back from Guam because they want to go to Guam and do the same thing. And I have a signature net made from here, made from me from here in Washington. And so that's my journey with this. I want to continue it, and then my daughters also want to learn. So my three girls, they're always interested. They always want to help me make the lead or help me hold the line while I'm tying, which it drives them because it gets them off their phone and their electronics.
There you go.
They're more interested in knowing how it is. So I said, when we go to Guam, you'll be my chili guaga, and then you will learn how to throw after if I make you a smaller net.
Yeah.
But it is time consuming. This net that I just completed, this took about 3 weeks for me to sew,
That's
then
that
about
fast.
another 3-4 more days to sew the lead. That's after making the lead and sewing the lead on. And then this net here, this one here took me 3 months to sew it up to 8 feet before I had to cut 6 feet off and then re-sew again. But yeah, I learned from all my mistakes because now if a net's broken or it rips, I would know how to fix it.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of me learning how to the nets because of my uncle who actually scolded me already about it. May rest in peace, Uncle Stuck You. uh, but now, if you were still alive, you'd probably be proud of me right now because I won't tear your
Absolutely.
nets. But yeah, it's a drive. It takes long. You have to understand. And I always ask my mom. I go, "How did Tata know how to count to build a net?" Because there's a lot of math in this stuff. Knowing how to make it wide. If you sew a net straight down, it's just going to be a tube. You need to know how to make it spread out by adding more eyes. And she always said, "No, I don't know." I said, "Well, Tata never spoke English, so I don't know how we count." and all he spoke was Chamorro, and we didn't understand what he was saying. I wish I did, because then I would have learned.
No, Sidus Mase. We've got we've got some questions that are coming in. Senor Bernard, did you want to add anything else before I get to some of the questions that have come in?
No, I think it's great, Chris, what you're doing, and especially when you pass it on to your daughters. We spoke earlier when you were on the net that that Chiliguagua is a rite of passage.
It is.
It is your way to becoming that talazero and then on to becoming that master talazero. So
Hey, Biba Biba. And here we've got Jordine. We've got Jordine who's tuning in from Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Oh wow.
And she says that she's excited she'll be back on island in July, and she hopes to see the two of you when she's home in July. Biba Jordine, Hungan Fanachu patron
Hopefully we
Jordine.
meet up.
And then, oh, okay, so this question is a little bit of a personal question, but so how did you do the first time you threw a Taladza net?
How did I do it? Throwing the net?
This is for both of you. So, how did you do the first time that you threw a Taladza net? Because I mean, I can tell you the first time I threw a Taladza net, I did not do well. I
It
brought
did.
a lot of shame to my family, and so and so how did each of you do the first time that you threw a Taladza net?
The first time I threw a Talazza net was actually in the backyard trying to catch a chicken. And I didn't catch the chicken because the net didn't open right. So it took me a long time trying to figure it out and then knowing how to balance the net. That's the key, is to balance the net before you throw it. It took me a long time to understand that because growing up, I didn't know what balance was. You just pick the net up, it's heavy already. And then watching my dad, watching how many times he counts the net to split it before he throws it. I'm like, oh, so that's what I got to do. So now I do this number. Once you get that down and know how to release at the same time, the net will always open. It may not open big, but it'll still open up.
yeah, with mine, the casting, my dad said, just put the coconuts down and throw over the coconuts. But that didn't work for me. Look, because I tore the net with the coconut. I was too impatient to try and take it apart. So you're not the only one, Chris, that got scolded for holes in the nets, which is also, rite of passage, right? You get scolded, you learn from those mistakes,
Yes,
and you progress. But when my casts, banana shapes, they were never, wide open. So it took a long time. I don't know how long it took, but then throwing out on land and when there's no moving fish or there's no waters or to see through and to deal with is totally different. When you're in the water, it's a totally different ball game, because you got to watch how you walk so that you don't scare the fish. You got to watch how the fish are coming in, how tails up, wherever you're at. There's certain things you're looking for, patterns in the waves. But it took a while. My net throwing still was bananas when I hit the waters, but I just kept going out, and I kept meeting my uncles out on the reef after working on the low tide. I kept looking out, to see, what kind the tide is. If it was coming in, then I'll go out there and then I'll meet up with either my cousins or my uncles. But a lot of my uncles I would meet out with them out there. Does take a while to learn. Some people are gifted, or it doesn't take them much, but we'll see who if we have super talents at our workshops.
Yeah.
Oh, Biba Biba. And here's another question. Senor Bernard Estiparahogo. Um, we were discussing earlier those who have been honored as masters for Taladzero, and you mentioned four. Can you name the rest of them for
Yeah,
somebody who's watching?
yeah. So there's one of the first ones. It's a couple. Tun Jose, Pablo Agun, married to Immaculada Areola Perez. They're familiar Macaca and Corinzu. They're from Tumun, the Tumun area. I know that family well because he used to own that, I think, the Agun store as well. The next one is a father and son, Joaquin Castro Guerrero, and his son Tony Anthony, or I should say Joaquin Cruz Guerrero and his son Anthony Castro Guerrero, Familia Tiku, Lodu, and Anaku. Um, and then the fourth one is Tun Vicente Salas Sablan. And I don't have a family name on him, and that's still a work in progress. I'm studying his genealogy, but he's the only one listed that's actually from Saipan. The rest are all from Guam. And then, of course, our Uncle Joe. That's the fourth one. So those are the four master talajeros listed in the Masters of Tradition.
No, Sidus Mase, Senor. And for those of you who are watching who are interested, and remember that the Masters, sort of the Kaha Masters series, is the when they started to select. It kind of went through an interesting process. There was the first generation, there's the second and the third generation. The second generation was the tough one because that's when they started to honor talazeros, lanceros, pescador, and so on. And sometimes people would, and the research that they did was very important, but then sometimes people would wonder and say, hey, wait a second, why is Joe Punzalan the best taladzero? Who made him the champion taladzero? My dad was better than him, and so on. And then even especially the lancero, because there was like there, there was like two that were named as master ranchers, and that was like the big controversial one because
Yeah.
it's like, oh my goodness, who says that Juan Cruz is better than my family at ranching? And I mean, most people were okay with one of the other choices, the late Davy Crockett,
Yeah.
Alfred Flores, just because he was iconic in a lot of other ways. But then it was controversial in that way. But and so at that time they wanted to name a lot of people, but then some people were frustrated because they thought, who does this make them the best at this? And the many meanings of what does it mean to be a master? Does that make you the gold medal winner for this and that? But I think looking back now, it's just really important that they collected all the history about so many of these people because nowadays it's easier to honor cultural masters.
Mhm.
But even 20, 25 years ago, a lot of people weren't looking for you know, weavers or talazeros to honor them the way that we do today.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to understand that, that's not the point, one's better than the other. It's really a matter of engaging and taking the step forward to nominate somebody, with and write it up. Unfortunately, you have to game the system and know how to write, collect all that information to elevate them and to demonstrate, that these people are worthy of being. And even if they don't make the book, maybe not now, but maybe later they'll make the book, because there's always publication limitations, and I'm not, trying to make excuses for them, but it's a never-ending story. Um, People will always come and go, but it's very important. I got the genealogy lens. It's very important, for our people to tell the story of our people, not from the lens of outsiders or people who don't know or who are third parties, but the people who have actually lived and witnessed it. It's very important, and that's where the families are very important to elevate, their families to say that my parents were really great at this, this particular tradition, and if we can get that kind of uh, traction, and virus they call it, make it go viral, hopefully, spark more interest and inspire and aspire people to take the initiative, to do that.
No, Sidus Masen. Let me just read a few more comments that have come in because they came in right in response to the discussion we were having. Wait, Mangesti. Eh, si Senyor Ben Lam Lam San Nicolas, si Cantot, Chamoru, elect niya Dunklo na Sidus Masi pari contribution midzo pari lenatla taladzero. So he wants to agradece bidan mi midzo. Si Senyor Sidus Masi, Senyor Ben. And then Senyor No Kitugwa. Ilegna Karakwet Taladzero knows his own way of using Lagwanzotti. Tadza ni unu mas mauliki otru. Hungen, as you were saying, Senor Bernard, it's
Yeah.
it's it's not really about and I like the way that you reframed it, that it wasn't really Kaha necessarily who chooses. It's more like families nominate, the community nominates, and so on.
Yeah.
And
And I think basically it just depends on where you are on the island too. I mean, they got the Talajero, master Talajeros in the south, the central and the north. So I think that's where it all bases off. People want to get the closest one, and then it's all word of mouth after that.
Yeah. Because I'm not a master talazero, but the best moment that I had in one of my talazero moments was actually catching a school of the sedzong, not the sedzong, but the heating. And I
Eating.
was chasing that sucker inside. It was about 4 feet of water because they came in, and I was just chasing them in the water, and I just happened to get the right timing down, and I never caught that much of it again on that. I've caught quite a bit of tataga that way chasing them, but not as much as when the heating came in. So, there's good times and there are bad times.
Yep.
no, no, Sidzus Masi, I want to give you, we are just about out of time. And so I wanted to give you, very quickly, I want to just kind of put up on the screen again the sort of the information about the Taladza workshop. The Chamorro Day Festival is the 27th, but the workshops are on the 25th. This is all happening in Tacoma, Washington. Here's the QR code. And man, I haven't been up to any of the stuff that's happening in the Pacific Northwest, but man, that's cool spot Barragata up there, Umbi. Wow. Oh my goodness. This is like
We gotta try to
this is
find a
like
way to
like
get you out here,
yeah, no,
for
Hungan,
this
there's so
festival.
much. It's like there's so much stuff happening up there, and so but it's so exciting. But yes, please, there's not just this workshop, but there's other workshops happening, and one of the things that I'm super excited about is just how, especially in the Pacific Northwest, there's this combination of culture and sort of education, learning and with commerce, of course, because, it's the Chamorro Day Festival. So there's going to be the Guam Seal keychains, and the t-shirts and I have too many already. But here's the information. Please sign up. This is a wonderful opportunity. Let me give you a chance now for both of you to share Hafi I ultimo na sinangan midzu, I ultimo na hinasun midzu, your final thoughts. Anything that you want to share kind of about the importance of the taladza, or something you want to just share about the workshop. Any sort of parting words of wisdom that you have. And Chris, we can go to you first, and then we can end with Senor Bernard.
Yeah, I mean, I want a lot of people, or not just a lot of people, anybody to learn the talaza, the taledzero way. It starts off by making the net first and understanding the net, because then if you break the net, you know how to fix your net. And I didn't know that growing up. I always there's a hole, just try and roll the string in there to that won't see it. But that doesn't fix the problem; it makes it worse. So my goal is to try and educate more people in all ages, because there's elders that asking for nets from me, and but I want to teach them how to fix the net, so that way they won't have to depend on anything else. I mean, buying a net is different from having it made, you know, from someone who actually understands the way the net's supposed to be built. And so that's going to be my main focus, is for to educate more people in how the net, from the start of the net, from the kopu, which is the top part of the net. That's the heart of the net. If you can't get that net, that first ring correct, your net will be wonky coming down. It won't line up. And so that's the frustrating part of the net. After that, it's a it's a home run stretch all the way down to the plomo.
Oh, Jesus Masi. Again, I feel like eventually down the line there's going to be like a Taledzero Words of Wisdom book that will be created by the two of you. And so, who nanenga, who gof nanenga esti? Malabo jo un copia, por
We're
favor.
we're gonna
Okay.
work on that.
Hungan, Senor
Uh,
Bernard,
well,
por favor.
yeah. Like I don't know if you know Ed Sengil at one time used to be a writer contributing, at the Guam PDN, and he had Talazero Tales column. So, yeah, that can be a spin-off too. And he lives out here in Washington, so hopefully we can get him
There
involved.
you go.
I'm hoping he's going to be out here because he's another good Talazero out there. But I really appreciate this opportunity, Miguel, of you having. I understand that they had a Talazero workshop on Guam too. I don't know if it was last year or just earlier this year. It's coming alive now. It's taking traction on here, and then anybody who wants, us can contact us to see if we're available for workshops. We already got one for this Chamorro Day Festival, the Marianas Festival, the Marianas Liberation that's coming up. They want us to do one. I'm not too sure if we're going to be able to do that. Chris is going to be on Guam. I'm going to be out here, but I appreciate this opportunity. This whole focus, again, I want to iterate, especially while you're here, Chris, is because it's you that started this. And I want to elevate you because you're that generation that's going to propel this to move forward. My forte is tomorrow genealogy, so I'm just anxious to see, how far you're gonna take this, with these workshops on your own.
Thank you.
Biba, Biba. No, and Senor, at the start of our conversation today, we were talking about, all the exciting stuff that's happening around Chamorro festivals lately. And and also kind of one of the long-standing issues in the diaspora has been kind of continuity and sustainability in Chamorro organizations. Because some things in Guam around culture are tied to government entities or nonprofits, and so there's funding and there's some continuity there. But in the diaspora, a lot of it is individuals and community. And so when the Magahaga or the Magalahi Matai, but a stroke, but when they leave for Vegas, and they're not there to keep everything together anymore, then the org disappears or the org can't sustain. And so, but one of the things that I find so encouraging with especially what I see in the Pacific Northwest is just that the Chamorro diasporic community has started to reframe things around not sort of the social clubs or the fiesta or the novena communities of the past, but just around a broader sense of identity, cultural identity and celebration, in which there's room for so much more, so it's easier for one generation to take the reins from the next.
Yes.
Because all you need to do is feel pride or want to know more about your roots. It's not like in the past where you had to have like the strong faith in the same Catholic saint to be willing to host the big parties for everybody to keep the group alive, or you had to have the same strong connection to the Marianas or Guam to host everybody and keep the group alive. Now you can be proud but not know who you are exactly and want to know who you are. So you have a big party in Tacoma and everybody comes and we find out who we are and we
Yeah.
find out more and it's so amazing to see. And so but I'm so inspired by the example of the two of you and so many others who make sure that the gatherings are not just t-shirts, are not just sinahis, even though we love our sinahis, but there's also tiningu, cultura, you know
Lenguaje.
lenguaje todo en nausia. So ta necesita nosia. If we don't have those, then cinema bendi, y culturata gi eBay, gi Amazon
Yeah,
todo nosia.
exactly.
And so I really appreciate what you're doing. Hugo fa agradece Hamzo por ifinatunmizu para este episode fanatsu. Hu agradece Hamzo ni ume egazan ume ekung oklokwe. Este ifinapu este episode fanatsu. Adios. Este kiman at li hitatlu esta.